Geniveve Joan, the daughter of a piano player and one of the first famous female portrait artists, was born in Ireland in 1895 and emigrated to the United States when she was 2 years old. Her parents settled in the San Francisco area and she was raised in the theater culture.
I'm from San Francisco, and after the earthquake and fire in 1906, my chosen field was little theater to start with, and I became a fairly accomplished actress.
From childhood she acted in burlesque plays, using the stage name of Joan. She was a model as well as an actress, with many risque photos taken during this period.
Ginny! She's my grandmother. When I was little, I called her Ginny, so that's what I remember, and it's awesome that I can see these movies and know that I have this connection to this beautiful star, and it's actually my grandmother. And, you know, I see qualities of her and myself, and, you know, just movements, and, you know, it's weird seeing her, you know, that's her image of her, and I see her so young and so beautiful, and then I have pictures of her when I grew up, and here she is this completely other woman, so I see every phase of her life, and even though I never got to meet her, I really feel like I know her.
My grandmother was a beautiful, beautiful woman. She was 100% dedicated to the theater. However, she had a secret ambition to be in movies.
She wrote her good friend Alice Gold, who invited her to a birthday party being held on New Year's Eve, 31st of December 1917.
And while I was acting, mostly my career was in San Francisco, I met up with a nice friend of mine, my friend Alice, who had already gone to Hollywood, where people were going to get their careers underway, and she invited me, so I went.
Accounts of the time say that Briscoe was depressed and that he was refusing to mingle with the guests. Then, after talking to his friend Lawrence, Briscoe saw Genevieve's red hair from the crowded room and immediately came up to her and introduced himself.
Briscoe, who was very talented and wanted to produce his own one-reelers. I met him at a New Year's Eve party. He saw me across the room. I had red hair. He was short.
And she was the type of woman who was a very classic, old-fashioned, and played hard to get, and I think that works in her favor.
It's all about the chase, and once you give in, and once you know, give them what they want, they'll never come back. So, for my grandmother, I always heard these stories that she was this, you know, beautiful, beautiful queen, and everybody wanted a chance to date her, to, you know, be with her, but she just was always on her own. She was a workaholic, and she, you know, loved this movie so chubby.
He came over to me and said, "Would you like to be in the movies?" Which is always a great come-on line, and I thought that's what he was doing.
She pretended that she didn't know who he was, and at first charmed him so as others would remark that she had him smiling brighter than the moon. Then somehow the first meeting went horribly wrong within the first couple of minutes, when she accidentally bruised his ego. He quickly walked off dejected. Alice practically threw Genevieve after him, and luckily she cleared up the misunderstanding. Happy again, he offered her a role on the spot as his leading lady without ever seeing her act. Just by being enchanted by her beauty and by watching her mannerisms, he thought that they would be a good match for a series of films. She would also become the love of his life.
And I thought, well, maybe I'll take a chance and try that.
So anyways, I mean, there were a lot of stories about, you know, Briscoe. He was in love with my grandmother.
He had a series of films with Mabel in the title.
He needed to have a real gimmick to be able to promote what he did. At the time, Fatty Arbuckle and Charlie Chaplin were the people that had made a good series with Mabel Normand, very well-known actress at the time. So it was suggested to him, as a matter of fact, by Buster Keaton, that he use that name Chubby, which was similar to Fatty, and instead of Buckman, use Buckle, so he would be Chubby Buckle. And perhaps he could use Mabel because that was already popular and they had stopped making that series, so he could be Mabel and Chubby.
Mabel's Problem, I believe it was called. That was the first film together, and again, that one is not very well known. Mabel has a problem. She's wanting to purchase a dog at a pet store, and she can't decide which one to choose from, and so she's all by herself, looking very innocent and wondering which sweet dog can I take home with me. And of course, Chubby just walks in, minding his own business, and he meets Mabel, and she just opens up to him, shares his problems, and he eventually helps her figure out which dog to pick. Unfortunately, she picks the most ferocious one, much to Chubby's chagrin, and so it ends up with the dog chasing Chubby all around the neighborhood. A package rat, I believe they're going on a cruise together, and the boat is very small. And so Mabel keeps telling Chubby, pack light, because we only bring the necessities. And so there's another big game going on where Chubby is deciding what to bring, and he's bringing all this random belongings that no one would ever need on a cruise. He has a plunger, he has a typewriter of some kind. I think he was known for being a gambler at some point. I mean, he had a fancy for gambling, and so he tries to bring on this big roulette wheel on the boat. That was kind of funny.
This example of deviousness in Briscoe was also an attribute of the Chubby Buckle character. Briscoe, like Chubby, would use his brain to get ahead of others when his body or looks wouldn't help him. The series of films established Geniveve as the Mabel character, and she worked with that alias for 53 films, from 1918's Mabel's Problem to the December 1922 film Mabel's Mummy.
Chubby Buckle.
And people, they've already, paid their 5 cents to get into the theater at this point, and so they're not going to get up and leave, but they've already got him in there. So you look at his box office receipts, and he's very, very successful opening weeks, and then sometimes drop off a little bit after that because people would figure out that Mabel Norma wasn't even in the movie.
Well, obviously it's very difficult to live up to the names of some of the greats, Charles Chaplin, Buster Keaton, Harold Lloyd, all those popular names you immediately think of when you hear about silent films. But Chubby had a bit of a disadvantage. He didn't come from any vaudeville backgrounds. He couldn't play any musical instruments, he couldn't sing, couldn't dance, and so he really knew that was his calling. And so when he went to try and pursue that career, he knew he was at somewhat of a disadvantage because he didn't have some of the original background that a lot of the vaudeville stars had.
I don't know, he was just adorable, I think, as a character, and I think I just wanted to know more about him.
I think as brilliant as Chubby Buckle was in his marketing, producing, writing, directing, and acting and physical comedy, he followed his heart. And he wasn't going to risk his health because he valued his life. So he did what he could with what he had. He was, didn't abuse things, didn't abuse himself, and went for it. And I admire that. I truly admire that.
He wasn't much of, athletic guy, not much stunts, not much physical action. But he had some kind of mystery, some kind of, what's the word, maybe ambiguity?
I think that he possibly didn't have the withstanding career and fame throughout time due to some other karmic reason.
Well, Chubby had a reputation of being extremely cheap, which I think came from his parents. Growing up when he did, and his parents were cheap, and it just carried over to him. And he knew he was very poor, and he wanted to save as much money as possible and not spend it. So it carried over to him.
Nevertheless, though, he did find his niche in his comedic stylings, his signature tip of the hat, trademark he would do whenever he'd meet somebody, the absent-minded look you'd have on his face whenever trying to get into one of his misadventures.
Chubby, I didn't know very much about Chubby. Very coincidental. I was given the assignment here when the studio was restoring the Chubby movies, and I got a big stack of cells I needed to restore. And was telling my family, very proud of the work I was doing. I told my mother that I was working on a Chubby project. She told me my grandfather knew Chubby. For some reason, my grandfather got very angry. I don't know why.
His sharpness, his complexity.
That was the charm of Chubby, always making these wrong decisions, but, and always suffering of these circumstances, but in the end it's kind of like, we like him anyway, that's kind of the charm he had.
Yeah, he always has a way of doing that. I mean, he always has a way of bringing you back and just enjoying him.